What the heck? Hey everyone. Sorry about that. That didn't go the way I expected it to. Whoops. Hello, hello, hello. Clicked the wrong button there. Planned to do the opening thing, but that didn't quite work out. That's okay. That happens sometimes. So, welcome to Friday. Welcome to the Friday anime stream. Welcome to the weekly dig. We're gonna talk a bit. Hybrid anime, we can certainly talk about that a little bit. I am partaking a little bit tonight. This was not a bad week at work. A little, somewhat stressful, but I just thought I'd have a little something, something. Not bad. I've actually had this. I've had that bottle of sherry for a while, and that is no longer a happy bottle of sherry. I think that is going to move away. Oh well. Last day is tomorrow. Oh, always bittersweet. At least bittersweet when folks move on, depending on how all that goes. Yeah, I do love sherry. I'm a fan of sweet things in general, and I do like stuff. And this is a bottle of cream sherry I've had for far too long, apparently. So that's not going to be that thing. But yeah, that's whew. So how have your weeks been? I've been catching up on the anime of the season. Caught a little bit more of No Guns Life. Very gratified to see the plot on that is moving pretty quickly. At least in the first few episodes. Not that there's a huge amount happening, but there's a setup in the first episode that I expected to be kind of a long-term goal, and they actually made some great progress on that in the second episode, which I was like, good. You're not going to, you know, show a few things and then say, oh, but that's, we're not going to show that again until like episode 12. Pretty good. Sure, could have been a storage. It's made it gone bad, and it's not terrible. It's definitely the taste is not good. I've had much better much better sherry in the past, so that's gonna get poured out. Hey YK2K, good to see you. Wario Port maybe. That should be a thing. Wario Port, I think. But yeah, catching a little bit of anime. There's actually an anime convention going on not far from me this weekend. The first iteration of a convention called Konjutsu. And I just heard about it last week, so I might stop in there. Stop by the hotel tomorrow and just see what it's like. So, stop in. It's always interesting to see a convention the first year, see what they're doing. Assassin's Pride not gripping you so far? Fair enough. I can definitely see Assassin's Pride being an anime that works for some people, doesn't work for others. Different strokes for different folks. And I'm just kind of curious to see where they go with that story. Interesting to see something that is taking very common tropes, but going in a slightly different direction with it, rather. Food Wars, yeah, that is the problem with Food Wars, is it will ignite the hunger. I finished watching the Great British Baking Show latest season this week, and boy, has that gotten me into in a cooking mood. Been doing a fair amount of cooking myself. Those of you who haven't been on the Discord, I've been making sushi this week. It's a lot of fun, not hard at all. Just got to take some rice and some nori and roll that up. Just got to get used to it. And there are a few little tricks to making that really look good, or really come across well. But the basics of making sushi is surprisingly easy. And yet again, I'm having some focusing issues. So what I'm going to do now is the thing where we lock that down. There we go. Little things trying to go. Fair enough. Yeah, just normal sushi roll kind of stuff. So yeah, or definitely enjoying making that. Gonna try making some stuff over the weekend too. perhaps some mochi over the weekend. A little rice flour balls. We'll see. But yeah, so that's a plan. Again, just kind of fun playing around with cuisine. This month's hobby and hobby hopper is Japanese cooking. We're about halfway through the month now, almost exactly halfway through the month. So it's been fun trying out those various recipes. Japanese cooking turns out to be not particularly difficult on the at the beginning, right? Like I'm sure Japanese cooking is difficult to master in terms of getting it exactly right, but in terms of being able to make these basic recipes, I'm finding it pretty straightforward, which is kind of nice. This will not be handmade mochi. This will be using rice flour. I might try both the sweet and the savory kind. I actually made some pulled pork a while back. It's sitting in the fridge, so I might make some pulled pork mochi. Might be fun. And then also, of course, sweet mochi. I actually have some ice cream in the fridge that I might be able to make ice cream mochi with. But otherwise, I might just make the red bean paste. Need to go out to a local Asian mart probably tomorrow morning and pick up some of those basic ingredients to make that stuff. That'd be kind of fun. But yeah, the whole on the mochi, not just yet. Although I came across a recipe of making mochi using rice with a stand mixer. Basically, put the rice in a stand mixer and just blend it. Not quite blend it, but use a beater, and that actually mashes it apparently pretty well. Not exactly the same as the hand pounding, but it's reasonably equivalent apparently. So yeah, gotta get some matcha, of course. Actually, I believe I have some. I know I have some matcha, just green tea bags. So I might just tear one of those open and use that for the matcha seasoning for a mochi. Matcha mochi would be kind of nice, but that'd be worth experimenting with. And if I do it, I'm gonna try to record it or stream it, something along those lines. I'm actually not much of a fan of spicy Asian dishes. Growing up, my mother was more of a French-inspired cook, and my dad came from Massachusetts and had very mildly seasoned food. So it was a lot of beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, that kind of stuff. Not just really so his palate did not go towards spicy. And obviously French cuisine is not particularly spicy, so growing up I just did not have the palate for that stuff. So, I can eat a relatively spicy dish, but I don't seek it out personally. It's an element of cuisine that I would need to work my way up to. I know if I just jumped to a spicy dish, my palate would just explode. So, got to go there. But trying to, like I said, trying to start with the Japanese stuff and then maybe move in that direction. And there's not that much spicy. Yeah, I've tried Ethiopian food and hasn't really. I haven't. There's not. There is some Ethiopian food in my area, but not a lot. And that which I've tried has been just foreign enough that I would need more time with it to really experiment. To really get used to the food. It's something that I can't just jump into and be like, oh, this is delicious. I need to acclimate the palate to it, sadly. So yeah, I grew up with, French food, American food, British food. Not so much British food, but some Italian basic stuff like that, but nothing too crazy. Which is just the reality of things. I like a variety of food, but I'm not one of those people where I need to eat a different cuisine every day. Where it's like, well, I had pizza yesterday, I can't have pizza today. So fortunately, I don't have that planet hopping palate that a lot of folks do, which tends to up the price and sort of keep you poor as you're kind of trying to jump around. Yeah, there's apparently some good Ethiopian food near Otakon. I know I've been to an Ethiopian place, but near there. But yeah, I'll have to figure that out. Play around. Native American, nice. Haven't done much Native American stuff actually. Any at all that I can think of. I should stop by the Museum of the American Indian and see if they have any of that stuff there. Don't think too much. That's not really their deal. Hey, Child Raccoon, good to see you. So we will see. Apparently, a Pokemon game came out, and there's all sorts of debate and fury over that, as is to be expected. Did you know the media franchise with the greatest revenue of all time, what that might be? The media franchise that has made the most money of all time. That is, believe it or not, Pokemon. Well, Pokemon games are universally popular, but there's also, controversy. You know, this Pokemon doesn't appear until this point in the game, and that's a travesty. And they didn't, they changed this, they didn't change that. How dare they? Always complaints. They haven't included all the Pokemon in this game, and apparently that's a big thing. So yeah. Yeah, not a lot of bear meat in this area for some reason. I don't know. We do have bear occasionally. My mom had saw a bear come through her property not long ago. Pokemon Hentai is a total flop. I'm not sure about that. I'm sure that's out there and I'm sure it has its audience. But anyway, y'all hear that? Wait a minute, what's going on? Hold on, sorry. Ah, always something. Hold on. Please stand by. Stand by, ion control. There we are. Okay. And welcome back to the anime and manga news for November 15th, 2019, or at least the week ending thereof. The official website for Kyoto Animation's Violet Evergarden the movie has announced the film's updated release date. The movie was originally planned to release in January, but was delayed in light of KyoAni's tragedy in July. The new premiere will be held Friday, April 24th of 2020. The production committee sent thanks to the fans for all their support and noted that the staff and director are putting all their strength and hearts into finishing the film. The studio also confirmed this week that the release of the new free anime movie has been delayed from its original summer 2020 release due to various circumstances, understandably. A new release date for the film has not been determined, but the announcement assures that the staff are working hard to make a film that will, quote, meet the expectations, end quote, of their fans. As always, best wishes to all the staff at Kyoto Animation as they get back to work in this difficult time. Just in time for the 65th birthday of the original Kaiju, Toei Animation and Tsuburaya Productions have announced a collaborative CG anime project entitled Kaiju Decode. The theme of the project is, quote, a story about kaiju and girls, end quote. We all know that one's going. The studios are hoping to appeal to a worldwide audience with the new project, which definitely seems doable considering Godzilla's recent birthday and the major Western Godzilla movies released in the last few years. More information about the project will be announced at the Tsuburaya Convention 2019 event on December 14th. So kaiju fans, keep your eyes open. Meanwhile, sports fans and sports anime fans, particularly, this one's for you. Light novel label Shueisha Bunko announced on Twitter that high school volleyball novel series 2.43 Seiyin Koko Danshi Volleyball will be getting a TV anime adaptation. This story follows a pair of childhood friends with an up and down relationship as they enter high school and work to make their new volleyball team a success. There's a shocker. Yukako Kabe's novel series began in 2013 and has had 3 seasons so far. 2 novels in the first season, 2 in the third, 2 in the second, and 1 in the third. The franchise has also inspired a series of short stories and a manga adaptation which debuted in 2018. Now, if Monster Girls are more up your alley, there's good news for you too. Bandai Namco Arts announced on Thursday that author Yoshino Oroguchi's Monster Girl Doctor light novels are inspiring an anime series. The anime will premiere in 2020, with Yoshiaki Iwasaki directing at Arvo Animation. The novels began publication in 2017 and are licensed in English by Seven Seas Entertainment, along with apparently all other manga in the world. The story, which is apparently endorsed by Okayado, the author of the manga Monster Musume, takes place in a clinic for monster girls run by Dr. Glenn and his Lamia assistant. Now, our anime announcements so far seem to follow the theory, if you like something once, you'll like it again, so if you've been craving even more volleyball boys or snake girls, you've got a future to look forward to. Hey, it's certainly worked for Godzilla. Moving right along, this week's 10th volume of Koji Kumeta's Kakushigoto manga confirmed that the series is also inspiring a TV anime adaptation. More information about the new anime will be revealed in next month's issue of Monthly Shonen Magazine. The manga previously inspired a short anime promotional video, which was animated by Studio Shaft and released in 2016. This comedy manga shares the daily life of manga artist and father Kakushi Goto, who doesn't want his young daughter to know that he creates manga. The title is a 3-way play on words. Besides the father's name, it can also be read as both Hidden Things and Drawing Job. Now we'll actually move on. Tokyo Anime Center is currently hosting the second Anime Studio Meeting exhibition, where various anime studios showcase their works with the goal of teaching visitors and potential recruits about the anime industry. In this round of the exhibition, works are being displayed from studios Comics Wave, of Makoto Shinkai fame, Clover Works, Wit Studio, MAPPA, and Grizzly, including materials from Attack on Titan, Fate Grand Order, Weathering with You, and other prominent series and films. The displays feature posters and key animation frames, as well as a series of trivia questions staged throughout the exhibit. That's kind of a neat idea. These 20 questions test guests' knowledge of anime production and other facts about the industry, and are reportedly quite difficult. Even people who currently work in the industry apparently had some trouble answering them all. Wow, that's pretty geeky. The exhibition's final weekend on December 7th and 8th will also feature talk shows and recruiting events. So if you want to get into the industry, there you go. Finally, if you're an otaku and a classical music fan, you might want to get your wallet ready. The Dragon Ball Symphonic Adventure concert is coming to North America. The live concert series, which premiered in Paris in 2017, features musical arrangements and timed visuals from the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z anime series. The North American tour will make its first stop in Chicago on March 27th, good music town, with more dates and locations to be added. The World Festival Symphony Orchestra, led by conductor Eric Roth, will be performing the music. Tickets for the Chicago concert went on sale today, so check that out if you're in the Chicago area, or look out for more dates in the future. That's the news for this week. Thanks for watching. See you next time. I would like to see a fair anime girl, too. There we go. Can we go back to the? There we go. Everything's switching around. Oh, thanks, Aim Escape. Yeah, I'm just trying different environments, different directions. I can do a lot of. I mean, I can. How's that? um, Always fun to experiment. I kind of like this. The angle is kind of dynamic. That's kind of fun. Makes it a weird position for my chair, but it would work. Might play around with this a little bit more. Um, but yeah, so neat seeing some stuff happening in the anime world. I actually just wanted to skim back through that, see anything particularly remarkable. Um, Interesting, the anime studio meeting exhibition, trying to actually drum up recruits for various anime studios. I think they were doing that when um, when I was there, actually, back in 2012. Um, no, it can't be. This is only the second exhibition. But at the Tokyo Anime Center, which was this small space at the time, they had a little exhibition of Ghost in the Shell, I believe. And they had like keyframes and drawings and so forth, which is pretty cool. Um, yeah, yeah, I hear that, Admiral Shaps. When you hear Monster, you're like, oh, good, an adaptation. Oh, you know, Monster is definitely one of the big ones. Um, it's like, oh, we want more. I want more Naoki Urasawa stuff to be adapted. They keep saying they're gonna do an anime of Pluto, but I haven't seen that yet. Haven't seen that actually come up. And yep, sure enough, that's Blam, right there, all of it. But yep. So actually, I want to talk about a few things tonight. We talked about Netflix and future of hybrid anime. Before we get to that, there was an interesting article. Let me see if I can actually. I might be able to pull this up in a way that we can all see it at once. If I do that, yeah. So this is an article from Anime News Network, which loves their ads, as you can tell. Jeez. But basically, see if I can zoom in a little bit. So Japan's arcades have gone from 26,000 to only 4,000. Now that's over the course of 32 years, right? So that's a long time. But there are now only 4,000 arcades in all of Japan as of 2018, peaking at 26,000 back in 1986. And the managers of some of the big arcades talk about, well, consoles can now pretty much match anything in the arcades. You can do multiplayer over the internet, so you don't need to meet up in an arcade to do multiplayer. And they said the average arcade game player age is now 40 and above, indicating they're not getting a lot of new folks in there. And a famous arcade in Kowloon near Yokohama is closing on Sunday, which is quite sad. So I want to focus a little less on the fact that this is a trend, because I think we all recognize this is a thing. It's not really surprising to anyone, but I think it's interesting to explore what might have been, or what could happen. What could arcades do to draw an audience? How could you reverse this trend? How could you bring folks in to the arcade? So, I think one of the issues that arcades have is they focus so much on the technology of the arcade, on the technology of the game, and on having these experiences unique to the cabinet, unique to the actual game itself. There's not much about the arcade, itself, like the actual environment, that is particularly appealing. I've been to arcades in Japan. I've been to some arcades over here, and they often don't feel particularly exciting to be in. It's basically a storage space for arcade cabinets, and I think that's nice. But yeah, I think fighting game tournaments would certainly help that are streamed, so people can kind of vicariously experience being in that space. And this idea of having like a live studio audience, I think, is a really big draw for that. And yeah, I think if you could do, I've always wanted to do some kind of like arcade that had like a, I was gonna say a bar, but that's not quite what I mean. Like sandwiches, food, drinks. You know, have it a place where you could actually hang out for some length of time. You could come and just have a, grab a sandwich, and play video games and so forth. I'm sure obviously there are issues there with cleanliness, but I think you can make that work. Have some tables around. Have it to be a place where you could just sit and chat and then go over and play. Now, obviously, also video games are kind of loud. They're kind of distracting. They're meant to be loud and distracting, to encourage you to come over and play them. But I think there could be some way of doing that. There's a place called Breezewood, Pennsylvania, that is this sort of central hub of several different major interstates in America, and they have this one big building that has a bunch of little like snack shops and so forth, and there's a little arcade space on the second floor there. And one of the nice things is that again, there's you can get food, you can get a bunch of stuff. There are tables and kind of just sit and hang out for a little while, and it's nice to be able to relax at an arcade. Food area. That's cool. Model living rooms from the different areas. That's really cool. That's a great idea. See here, VR arcade. That's not a bad idea. Have a place where folks can go in and experience VR, and I think also a place, and this might require the technology to evolve a little bit. But if I could bring my VR, helmet, or my VR stuff into an arcade and play VR games with other people, that'd be a big draw. One of the problems with VR right now is that you have a lot of cool games, but there aren't a lot of multiplayer games in VR. So having that experience where you're going back and forth, there's a shooter that they're trying to make into an esport. It's a VR shooter, sort of a Call of Duty-esque game. And the advantage being that because you are looking around and because you have a fake weapon in your hand and so forth, it's more immersive, and it requires a different set of skills than just a pure Twitch esport game. Kind of interesting. Yeah. Well, I was actually just watching a Netflix series set in the 1980s in Japan, and it connected something with me that I never really realized before. So, several of the early arcade games had, I'm forgetting the term for it now, but they had arcade games that were on a tabletop. So basically, you imagine a table with a screen in the bottom and then controls, and so you could play the arcade game there at the table. And I saw that they were, and I realized that it was installed in a cafe. So you come into the cafe and sit down, and that was just what all the tables had in them. So you could play a video game while you were sitting there. And I was like, well, that's genius, right? Where it is, the arcade is integrated into a cafe experience as opposed to the other way around. Excuse me. So you can imagine, Galaga, Pac-Man. So you can imagine like and maybe if you could partner with someone like Bally Midway or any of the companies where you could scroll through 100 different video games on your table and play those while you're drinking or chatting or what have you. I think that might work. Would be, again, kind of difficult and weird, but I think it'd be might be a thing to do. I've come across plans on the internet for building those at home. Just take an LCD screen, put it underneath a table, put a piece of glass over it, right, and you got a thing, and then put your controllers on either side. Be pretty cool. Obviously, it requires some tweaks to how the games are are structured so two people can play a game, go back and forth and such. But it's a that'd be an interesting tack to take to attempt something different. And again, bring the games. And I think that might be one of the things is you need to take, you need to rethink why people play video games. People are not going to come into your establishment to play a shoot 'em up. They can play shoot 'em ups at home. You need to integrate the experience into you need to integrate the game into the environment in some way, which again is just kind of hard. So we'll see. I actually have an arcade cabinet in the other room right now, which I'm trying to get rid of because it takes up a whole huge lot of space. And I'd like someone else to actually get some enjoyment out of it. So we'll see. Wouldn't mind. 1942 is a table for two-player back in the day. Yeah. They have quite a few. So if any of you ever want to experience this, there's a convention called MagFest. It's held in the DC area every year, and they have a room. If you've ever seen like a dealer's room at a convention, imagine that, but all arcade cabinets. Hundreds of arcade cabinets. And they have a bunch of those too. It is just absolutely nuts. From, Pong all the way up to the latest stuff straight from Japan. The Gundam battle pods are there. I don't think they actually had BattleTech battle pods. But that'd be the kind of thing they would have. Just really, really amazing. Really cool to see that kind of stuff in various places. All right, now, was it Jay? You want to talk a bit about the whole Netflix thing? Just scrolling back up. Hybrid anime. Yeah. My favorite arcade game is a very odd game called Frenzy. It is an unwinnable video game. You're in a maze that is quasi-randomly generated. It's one screen at a time of this maze, and there are skeletons and robots around, and you have to shoot all of the skeletons and robots on your screen. And when you do that, another robot comes in, and it's actually a bouncy smiley face that will kill you. And so you have to then run to another screen to escape from it. And then the process repeats. And so you're just racking up as many points as you can before you die. It is purely a, how long can I survive kind of a game, which I find really interesting. Partly because there tends to be quite a bit of actual strategy involved around, is this screen too dangerous? Can I just clear a path to the next room? All that kind of stuff. So because you're not, it's not a pure, like a racing game where the variables are fairly relatively limited. This is, a whole screen of walls and enemies, and you're trying to figure out the right way to deal with all that stuff at once. I find it really interesting. I have no idea what happens, how far to get in the lane game. That's another thing. Playing DDR, that's really cool. Yeah. DDR is definitely a social game in that sense. But yeah, so we want to talk a little bit about hybrid anime. And in that video, I was talking particularly about anime that are not made using the traditional funding model, where it's a manga publisher financing an adaptation of a manga into an anime for a season or two. But things like Netflix, and dare I say things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, as alternate funding sources for anime. The reality is, other than Netflix, there's not a lot out there. There's not a lot of other options. I was actually reading an article, actually a chapter of a book this week, talking about that, and about how there's been a lot written about this idea of fan participation in media, and how the fans are now the consumers are now the producers, and how it's upending all the traditional ways that media work. But then, particularly in the case of anime, the vast majority of anime is still funded by Katakawa and Shogakukan and, the half dozen major publishing companies that have been financing anime for the past, several decades. Those models are still very much dominant. We're not seeing a dramatic upheavals. We're seeing a few unusual things here and there, but then also, we saw, independent productions in the 2000s and the 90s and the 80s. It is not viable to crowdfund an anime beyond like a single, like a short film, basically. You really don't see anything beyond that because it costs millions of dollars to make an anime series, and you're not going to get that reliably out of a crowdfunding thing. And it would be don't want to say unwise, but if you were to say, hey, let's raise $6 million in a crowdfunding campaign as your starting goal, as your initial goal, it's very unlikely you'll hit it. If you're lucky and you do really well, you can hit, $1 million, $2 million on a Kickstarter, but that's usually for something that, has a much, much, much lower initial goal. So that's one of the problems. And then, it would be very difficult to kickstart something that's going to go on TV because the broadcaster needs to know if this is going to happen or not. Right? You can't guarantee the TV slot until you have the thing or until you have some guarantee of the thing. So it's be very difficult to finance a full TV anime that way. So you could get, like we said, like we're seeing some of these small OVAs thing here and there. Santa Company is one that came out a couple years ago that was crowdfunded. Yeah. And you do see games getting crowdfunded, but again, even there, we're not seeing those really, really big numbers most of the time, even for the really successful crowdfunding projects. Those are very much the exception rather than a thing anyone can depend on. But Netflix has deep pockets, and so they can just say, okay, make a Castlevania anime, and that's basically the entire brief. And I'm not privy to what goes on behind the scenes. And apparently Netflix is, I wouldn't say, they're hands-on in the sense that they do expect you to check in. They do want to know how it's going, and get a sense of it. They don't just say, here's $5 million, come back to us when you're done. Right, that would be irresponsible. But they don't get in and say, okay, well, you need to change this line of dialogue. No. Yeah, Netflix, obviously Castlevania, the Blam movie, and there are quite a few. I mean, they finance a lot of anime. The problem being, as I mentioned in the video, then it goes into the Netflix black hole, and it just kind of sits there. It's a lot harder to market something that's been paid for by Netflix. It'll be particularly interesting in a few years from now, once we see a shakeout to see if something could say get an initial release on Netflix, and then have other folks come along and say, okay, now we're going to do a second season or a movie or whatever, not on Netflix. Finance it separately from Netflix. Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's a great point, Wang Li, actually, is that if nothing else, Netflix is providing a space wherein folks can experiment, folks can make interesting new things, people can try new production methods like Blam. I think the CGI anime hybrid in Blam is excellent. Like it is a really engaging process. Hey, Azula, good to see. I'm certainly not complaining about there being more money available for anime. I'm curious to see how much of a real impact it's going to have. It's just really hard to change that direction, right? Why are genres more popular in one country as compared to one another? Is it culture or environment? I mean, I don't know that culture and environment can be separated. I think those are both, intertwined. Japan is very much, as an example, is very much informed by its nature, by the fact that it's an island country, all that stuff. And apologies if you hear me scratching myself. Whenever the seasons change, particularly into the winter, my skin gets very dry, and very itchy, so I am just unconsciously, doing this all the time. So yeah, I think it's kind of like anything, different cultures value different things. We're a very action-oriented country. We have been for a long time, particularly since the Wild West era. We valued people of action, people of independent spirit, which is a thing that, I mean, certainly was also prized in the Revolution, but was more exceptional. Whereas I think by the time we hit the Wild West, that became a more core part of the American ideal. Um, so yeah, and other countries are not like that. European countries generally are not action oriented. Obviously, a French person can enjoy an action movie, but it's not kind of core to the culture in the way. Yeah, exactly. If you're in a culture that kind of is the environment in a sense. Um, Totally, yeah. Horror is an excellent example where horror is a major genre over here in a way that it isn't in other countries. Whereas Japan, it's a very niche, but a very intense niche thing where there are really strong horror fans and movie makers who are like, really big into horror. Excuse me. And obviously the occasional mainstream success, but in general, it's horror fans talking to horror fans. Whereas over here, we can get a big, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. I know you did last summer, Scream. We've had a fair number of mainstream horror hits, but you don't get that too much. Yeah, totally. And I mean, if you start digging into like Japanese horror films, there's a large filmography, relatively speaking. It just very much speaks to that audience. If I can speak to something that's a little more adult, it's kind of like not everybody watches adult movies, but there is a strong audience for that buys a lot of them, that consumes a lot of them. Um, you know, so same kind of idea. Was like anime, right? Anime in America. I don't think the average American is gonna have an anime collection ever, um, right? Or Hong Kong films. Like I was a big fan of Hong Kong action films in my 20s, and I watched a good number of them. But I don't expect the average American is ever gonna watch a lot of Donnie Yen movies, right? It's just not part of what we're wired for. That particular kind of spectacle, particular kind of appreciation of the balletic nature of martial arts and action, right? Indeed, horror films are, particularly in Asia, tend to be more arty, for lack of a better term. They tend to be more crafted compared to over here, where because of the runaway success of the big blockbuster horror movies, people tend to churn out very formulaic horror movies. It's very hard to find an innovative horror movie in America, right? At best, you get something that is a very good execution of the formulaic elements. Whereas over in Japan or China or Korea, you'll get some really interesting stuff. Um, yeah, Jay, I'm more of a person who does recommendations as they come up. Right, so if somebody wants recommendations, they can just kind of ask me for something. And obviously, if it's just recommend them a manga, like I need more than that. But I haven't really done a general recommendation video. Maybe I could do that. Right, that's a good point. JJ, is that you do get taboos and stuff that's illegal or just not done. That changes things a lot. That's fair, Angela. Horror films are very much about dread, ideally. They're about exploring, waiting for things to happen. It's one of the reasons I like Halloween, is because instead of simply being about suspense, a lot of it is trying to figure out what's going on, Why are we being shown these characters now? What's going on with this kid? The suspense isn't when is somebody going to stab somebody else. It's being presented with unusual circumstances and unusual characters, and wondering kind of where's the director going with this. And so then when the horror happens, you're already engaged in the story and that kind of stuff. It's why a lot of horror movies don't really do much for me, because it's basically here are a bunch of really stupid people doing things that no one cares about, and you're just waiting until somebody shows up with a butcher knife, and it's like, and it's all preference too, right? There's always gonna be taste involved. I cannot stand romance movies. I there's like one romance movie I can think of that I like thoroughly enjoy watching, and most of the rest just bore me to tears. Because again, it's you're kind of waiting for them to get together, and I'm like, I don't care. Um, you're right. Yeah, the Colorado Space movie trailer looked really interesting. For those not familiar, that is an H.P. Lovecraft story. They're adapting into a movie. Um, um, and it looks like they're really going for it. It looks like they're trying to make something that is weird and off-putting, and has that sort of creeping horror of a Lovecraft story. One of the things Lovecraft does so well is taking very mundane people and putting them in a situation that is utterly indescribable and incomprehensible, and watching them try to deal with that. Right, like not just a mummy, not just there are people living under the stairs or whatever. The things happening are not possible according to the laws of physics, and are just literally make you insane. And so they do that trailer implies that they're going in that direction, which I'm looking for. Yeah. There was a really good black and white silent H.P. Lovecraft film made, I don't know, 5-10 years ago by fans. Look it up. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a surprisingly effective little, low budget movie, but they made it look like a silent film, with limited effects, but like limited effects like what you get in 1923, and that was really really neat. But Lovecraft is just really hard to do in film. I have given up, if you will, on the idea that Lovecraft. I no longer expect good Lovecraft adaptations, 'cause I think it is extremely tricky to get across in film. Right, non-Euclidean geometry. Right, you have to. You have to get a very specific tone right. That's tough. There are definitely movies that are bad, so bad it's good, but that depends on your definition of bad and good. Um, a lot of people think that Angel's Egg is a bad film, but I think it's good. I like the distinction that Mystery Science Theater made back in the day. Um, yeah, oh no, I read a fair chunk of Lovecraft. So Mystery Science Theater made one of the guys in Mystery Science Theater made this distinction. There are bad movies, and there are cheesy movies. In other words, there are movies that are ineptly made, and there are movies that are goofy and ridiculous. And those are often different things, right? Um, if the sound is so poorly recorded that you can't tell what people are saying, if there are cuts in the middle of the dialogue, if they splice things in random order so you can't tell what's happening, that's bad, right? That's ineptly made. But then there's cheesy which is like cheesy, fantasy films where you can follow the plot. The camera actually stays on the actors and isn't unfocused or whatever. And it's a perfectly appreciable thing. A lot of the sword and sandal movies, like the Hercules movies, are very cheesy, where it's just over the top acting and the sets are kind of wobbly and obviously cheap. But it's effectively made for what it is, and I love cheesy movies. I will watch cheesy movies all day. Played Call of Cthulhu for years. Nice. I don't think I've ever played Call of Cthulhu actually. I know I've sat in on a Call of Cthulhu game where some friends were playing it. I was just at the table. It was a lot of fun. I don't think I've ever actually played that. Yeah, no, that's as a Bill and Ted's a perfect example of a cheesy movie. Right? It's ridiculous. It is dumb in a lot of ways. But you can certainly follow it. And everything about it is of a particular type. It is very much meant to be goofy and over the top and silly. And even if it wasn't, that's exactly what it is. And it's just a ridiculous fun ride, right? It's like a roller coaster ride. It's not meant to be a consistent dramatic experience. It's meant to be a bunch of thrills. And yeah, I like that. I've actually been thinking about doing a series here on Geek Archaeology of watching a cheesy fantasy movie like every month, and just talking about things I notice in the movie. Because there's a lot of cheesy fantasy films on like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and such. Amazon particularly. Whoever licenses videos for like Amazon Prime Video, I think there are a lot of geeks in that department. Because like the anime always tends to be kind of interesting, not like not necessarily really high flyers. Like not, they're not all anime you'd recognize. You start watching them, you're like, oh, this is interesting. This is making me think, or this is an unusual take on something. They have a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, Killer Clowns, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Pet Shop of Horrors, all that stuff. No, not Pet Shop of Horrors. What is it? The little Pet Shop. Pet Shop of Horrors is the anime. I'm trying to think of the musical. Little Shop of Horrors. That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah. There's a lot of there's stuff out there. But I think it's fun to celebrate the movies where it's not necessarily Gladiator. It's not Titanic. But they created an hour and a half of entertainment, of perfectly satisfying action entertainment, even though it's just, a guy with a sword killing guards, and was the sword, Hawk the Slayer? Is that the one with the guy with the three-bladed sword? I think it's Hawk the Slayer. I should check out my riff tracks, because that's a movie. Toxic Avenger, yes. A lot of the Trauma films are cheese personified. A lot of them are really bad too, but Trauma is one of the few like truly independent films. Filmmaking companies out there, like really actually independent, not like Robert Redford. We're an independent film company that spends $25 million making an independent film. It's like, well, really, I would say Parasite, sci-fi horror. I mean, they're out there. There are a handful. Cat's Eye. That kind of thing. And part of the problem is you get into sort of all that urban fantasy, where like, I was reading some of X 1999, and I think that is technically set in the near future. Demon City Shinjuku is technically set in the near future, but that's where demons have taken over Shinjuku. Another totally, but yeah, and again, I think it's a good example of where sci-fi is certainly popular in anime, but horror is not, and that horror market is small, so that hasn't really penetrated into the the anime industry much. At least in terms of sci-fi horror or horror in general. Horror is not a big thing. I mean, I always mention Boogie Pop Phantom. It is technically sci-fi. I mean, it is very much sci-fi and horror. But not a lot of it out there. And I mean, there's a fair amount of sci-fi that has like horror elements, where like a weird monster will show up halfway through. Bubblegum Crisis. The boomers often are very horrific in that, but I don't know that it's actually fundamentally a horror anime. But some of those boomer mutations are definitely straight out of a Clive Barker movie. And also obviously, let's just be honest, um, certain adult movies often have a sci-fi element. A certain adult anime will have certain monsters with certain appendages. It's certainly horror in that sense. But yeah, sci-fi horror doesn't seem to be a really really big thing. And yeah, you're right. Horror manga is big, certainly. A lot of horror manga. Um, yeah, you're right, Wong Lee. Divergence Eve, absolutely. I watched the first episode of one of the Divergence Eve series, and there's a moment there where I was like, "Wow, I did not want to see that. I did not want that image burned into my brain. That's horrific, like horrific in every sense. Wow, ugh." I've not read much horror manga. MBD Psycho, which just felt very grimdark to me. Didn't really do much for me. Other than that, I don't think much else. I'm looking at the manga wall now. Um, no, not really. Lament of the Lamb, technically horror, right? Hmm. Boogie Bop. That's weird. Oh, there it is. Um, Blood Alone really isn't horror. It's vampires, but it's not horror. I mean, I guess Gege Gege no Kitaro, right? That's definitely horror, but it's more shonen horror, right? Yeah. The wall scrolls behind me today are Lucky Star, Lucky Star. What else? Black Rock Shooter, and that is a Gundam RX-78 2 back there, with actually white base, kind of hard to see in the background. Yeah, not read the High School of the Dead manga. Hmm. But yeah, I've never been much of a huge fan of horror. Oh, I read Kurosaki Corpse Delivery Service, like 1 or 2 volumes of that, and that was fine. But didn't really speak to me on like a story level, right? Like the characters just didn't really click with me. Um, and how I'm sure there's another 1 or 2 volumes of things folks have recommended to me that I've tried, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Manga that breaks the fourth wall, absolutely. Um, Now that you say that, it must have happened. Why can't I think of it? Huh? Huh? Manga that breaks the fourth wall. That's weird. I could swear I've read manga like that, but none of it comes to mind. Hmm. That's weird. All right, I think we've covered a good amount of material. That's about an hour. Um. Yeah. You're right. Gintama probably does. Oh, that's cool. Mononoke does that. Huh. I may have to check that out. Anyway, thank you all very much. That's going to do it for me for tonight. I'm actually pretty tired. So I think I'm going to go and lay down for a little bit and relax a little bit. But yeah, thank you all so much. It's always been a really fun weekend, really fun Friday night to chat. Hope you all have a good week. I might try to stream something this weekend. If so, hop on the Discord and we'll see if we can't watch something. But yeah, that'll do it. Thank you all very much. Have a great night. Until next time, watch more anime.